today, we are very happy to be able to sit down and have a chat with some of the most prominent person in crowdfunding. Let me introduce one at a time. Jonathan McGill is the CEO and founder of our crowd. Over the years, he's one of the leading high-tech funder in Israel. He's done something like he has raised $130 million, over 70 portfolios since February 2013. If there's any good question to ask on equity crowdfunding, this is the man who can give very good answers. And here we have, on my second, our gentleman here is Mr. Kevin. He's the MD of Incubation Ventures. He has 12 years of international experience doing funding, VC, and now, of course, he's also in the area of crowdfunding. So I'm very sure he'll be able to give us some very helpful pointers as we go. Ms. Sarika comes from Thailand, the Securities Exchange Commission. She's the Director of Capital Market Promotion with the Thai Securities Exchange. She has 20 years of experience in various capacities. She'll be in quite a good position to tell us about the regulation, how they started and moved. They were one of the early movers for equity crowdfunding regulations. And of course, not forgetting with Pak Igi. Pak Igi is from Indonesia. He's an independent commissioner for Bank Manula. He specializes in the area of what we call Islamic finance. And also, during my short chat with him, I was asked whether is crowdfunding something that can be done in Islamic finance. So from here, we'll take it through one at a time. Let me pose a couple of questions, introduce crowdfunding, pose a couple of questions, then we'll open the floor to ask any question. As our earlier speakers have mentioned, that crowdfunding is nothing new, and it's gathered speed, especially since 2009 until now. Equity crowdfunding has gathered speed. Where in Asia, for example, Thailand, Malaysia has gone ahead. They have actually worked up some regulations, some guidance for equity crowdfunding. India, Japan has also moved forward with this. Singapore, I believe, is in the process of working out some guidance, and it takes a little while for them to gather information and to build up. And I believe this, we are not very far from the rest. Taiwan is also a lead player in crowdfunding. So we have in Asia quite a good mix of people who are ready and very eager to move forward with crowdfunding. It is the regulators, in my opinion, it's the regulators' interest to support crowdfunding and accept it as a new normal in finance, where crowdfunding is concerned. Yeah. In the short span of, if you look back to 2013, 2014, 2015, the crowdfunding in Asia has jumped dramatically from 3 billion from 2 billion to currently moving to 3 billion. And the crowdfunding possibilities is immense. Let me give you an example, theoretically speaking. If everyone contributes $1 in Singapore, we have $5 million. If everybody contributes $1 in China, we have $1.3 billion. This is how big crowdfunding can be. This, in theory, it is possible. But here we are today, our topic is very much on equity crowdfunding. How do we ensure or create an opportunity for the man in the street, the small investor, to be able to empower and get an opportunity to gain some equity. If you put $10,000 into Alibaba, today it probably give you $5 million. But if you are given the equity, today you are still nobody. You have lost the $10,000 and given for a good cause, but you don't get anything in return. So equity crowdfunding, in my opinion, is something very important, very substantial, and very helpful to the man in the street. Maybe what I do now is I'll go into the main questions which is raised today. Today, our main topic is crowdfunding equity regulations encourage new opportunities in Asia. It innovatively disrupts and influences the democratization of finance. What the market needs to understand and why is this channel of alternative finance emerge and grow slowly, swiftly in capital markets system to serve SMEs and startups. I thought this question was a bit harsh. We talk about disrupting the financial system. I don't think crowdfunding will disrupt. It will come in to complement, to support, and to grow the system. In a very tough environment today, where economies are slowing down, where the banks are getting tougher, where the financial companies are putting more stricter requirements for loans, crowdfunding may be the alternative. If crowdfunding is an alternative, we must look forward and somewhere along the way reward the man in the street other than accredited investors. Let me start by posing a question to John. John has done a lot of crowdfunding and he successfully bring forward 70 portfolio, and he's in the process of doing a few more which are very exciting. I had a chance to talk to him earlier. John, you have raised funds successfully for scores of companies, including high-tech companies. How do you move from a voluntary contribution to equity reward crowdfunding?
So I think that crowdfunding is one of those things that, on the one hand, seems incredibly hyped and flavor of the month, flavor of the year, but in reality is actually underhyped. So I think that you're right, that the potential for crowdfunding going forward is something extraordinary that we really have not yet begun to appreciate. There are many, many flavors of equity crowdfunding. And at our crowd, what we're focused on is not the man in the street. We're exclusive. We're sort of the Goldman Sachs of crowdfunding. You have to have money to be part of our crowd. We check you out. You have to be what's called an accredited investor. And I think that the problem with crowdfunding is people are coming at it from different perspectives. Some people are saying, okay, you know what, we need to get money, forget the man on the street investing, but we need to get money to people who can't raise money. Right? There's tons of these entrepreneurs who have great ideas. We're not getting venture capital funding, we're not getting business angels. Let's go create more money for them. But then there's another perspective, which is not contradictory, but it's just different, which says, okay, there's all this great activity in innovation finance and in funding startup companies, except you guys aren't invited, right? In other words, the reality today is the hot deals are mostly in Silicon Valley, Israel, a few other places, and they don't need your money, they don't want your money. You might have $100 million with a gentleman sitting there at the table, ready to invest, and he gets on the phone, and he calls Sequoia Capital or Excel in the Valley and says, I'd like to invest $5 million in your venture fund. What kind of response do you think he gets? He doesn't get any response. They're not going to take his phone call. They don't need his money. Is Peter Thiel or Mark Cuban waiting for one of you guys? No. They frankly don't know you exist. They have nothing against you. It's just this whole process is completely oligarchical.
They maybe lost the money. Maybe got the dilution effect on the second round of funding. So this is the risk. If they know that one and they can accept it, they can invest. So they should bear in mind that this is the light touch for the regulator because we want this scheme happen. And lastly, for the fund investor, they need to know that some parts of their ownership should be in hand of the crowd or the investor. So maybe they have to communicate with them, and they need to make sure that they're working transparency because they use other people's money. That's all.
Thank you. Broadly, when it comes to equity crowdfunding, what Malaysia and Thailand has done is that they regulate the funding portal. If you set up a internet feature to raise funds, that portal is regulated in some manner. Both the countries also stress on education. You need to educate investors to put money inside. And of course, in time to come, they limit the exposure. They don't want the small investor in the street to put all their money into just one possible business, possible project. To take a gamble, it's not to take gamble, it's to take an educated investment. That's what the regulator want to do. But having said this, it will be great if the regulator does not close in too much on regulation. Let me go forward to ask Pak Iggy. Because Pak Iggy is a familiar person, he's very familiar with this Islamic finance. How in your opinion, is can crowdfunding blend into Islamic finance? Because you are quite an authority in this area, is that something that can benefit people?
Thank you. First of all, ideally, equity crowdfunding must be in line with Islamic finance. But unfortunately, equity-like financing or equity financing has a very small portion compared to financing-like transaction. But I do believe that in the future, Indonesia will also develop this equity financing, which is also equity crowdfunding, to have a bigger portion in future. And then we have recently have a case in Indonesia, basically, which is, we can say it's similar to crowdfunding. There is a preacher, a well-known preacher in Indonesia, and then because his mother said you should build a hotel, and then he preached from one place to other place, and then within 3 months, he can raise approximately 30 million USD.
That's great, isn't it? 30 million.
Yes, and then it will be structured into a Sharia transaction, to Islamic finance transaction, and then it should be equity crowdfunding, even though it's not done through the portal. It is offline. He gather the crowd from one place to another place, and then get that money within around 3 months, and then it attract regulator to give an advice what kind of transaction this should be treated, because we haven't got any regulation on the crowdfunding. So until now we are the regulator. Sometimes I said we, because I also part of the regulator. I'm a member of the Financial Service Authority also in Indonesia. So we advise that this form of transaction is converted into a cooperative. So the money is considered as a share of the member in the cooperatives. So this is an initial phenomenon to be the next equity crowdfunding in Indonesia. Based on this case, we are now working and building the draft of the regulation to allow and then to facilitate the equity crowdfunding with help of Ms. Hong Sin also. 2 times, I think 2 times you came to Indonesia, 3 times, 4 times. I met him 2 times at the forum. So hopefully within this year we will come up with the draft of the regulation to facilitate this equity crowdfunding. That's one thing. The other thing is, even though there is no regulation on equity crowdfunding, in Indonesia currently only Islamic financial institution can facilitate or can create such transaction like equity crowdfunding. In Islamic Bank in Indonesia, we have so-called mudarabah or musyarakah. It is an equity financing, or in other terms we call it special restricted investment. It can be one-on-one transaction. So if I have the money and I know who's the prospect of the who got the project, I can invest to that to that special project. Or many to one. We have one project, and then it can be financed or can be funded by many savers or many investors. And then it is already legal. It is already done and then approved by the central bank and the financial service authority. But again, it is still categorized as the equity crowdfunding like or similar to equity crowdfunding. If we done it through the portal, if we done it through the internet protocol, we can simply convert this product into an equity crowdfunding. So the seeds is already there. I mean, the prospect is already there, and we believe that Indonesia, as the biggest Muslim population in the world, will become the center of the Islamic finance in the future. And my introduction. Thank you.
That's very useful. Actually, you notice his roots long ago. In the early days, you talk about taunting. If you know among your friends who want to contribute some money, among you organize, you contribute money. And in today's context, because the internet is such an invasive instrument where everybody have a chance to read, to put their money, to make their own opinion, and to make the final decision. So, if I get it correctly from part B, actually the process is already in place for crowdfunding to issue equity. It's just the broad guideline the country, the regulators has to come in to provide. Because inevitably when it comes to money, someday somehow somebody will try to milk the system, and you have a black sheep who come in and scam it, and the whole world will go upside down. So we need some regulation. We need some guidance, but of course it must not be too tight. Let me pose another interesting question to John, because John, I like to talk to John because he's done quite a few many successful fundraising. What are the areas of consideration that needs to be put in place to ensure the growth of equity crowdfunding? I understand that you're doing accredited investors, but how will you spare a thought for the less sophisticated investors?
I think Gerben put his finger right the check. The real work does not start to raise money. This raising money, I'm sure if I'm speaking to entrepreneurs in the audience, you're saying, what's he talking about? It's really hard to raise money. Of course it's hard to raise money. But when you're done raising money, that's just like the first minute of a 90-minute football game, okay? You just got started. You gotta build a company. You've gotta hire a team. You've gotta find partners. You gotta get distributors worldwide. You gotta figure out how to rise above the noise of all the other startups and get to CNBC. You gotta do all this stuff. So what is the role of the crowdfunding portal or platform in doing this? And I think if you ask most people today, they'd say, nothing! That's not our job! We help you raise the money. Disaster. Total disaster. What you're going to end up doing is putting a bunch of men on the street, unsuspecting investors, who've never invested in a stock market, nonetheless a private startup, they give the money, and then the company fails. Because no one's there to sit on the board to provide guidance and assistance. And that is a huge, huge problem. There's a second problem, which is that most of the equity crowdfunding regulations, that in the US was just authorized 10 days ago and elsewhere, the way their model works is that the issuer, the company, the two guys and a dog, okay, in a basement, basically issue shares to hundreds of people in the crowd, maybe thousands. Now, number one, how in the hell are they going to manage these people? Okay, they can barely manage themselves and the dog. Okay, now they've got to go manage thousands of investors, report and handle it, and do all that. And the worst thing is that you've just put a mark of Cain, a bad sticker on this company that no venture capitalist will ever touch. Because smart money, when they see a cap table, when they see the capital structure, and see that there are 2,000 individuals being managed by 2 guys and a dog, no matter how great that dog is, or how great the company's idea is, the VCs are going to run away. Say, sorry, I want another company, clean cap table. So we're believers in our crowd of what we call SPV structures, where all of a sudden, or it can even be nominee structures, where you have essentially an aggregation function. You take all these individual investors and you put them together in some kind of legal construct, and then you write one check to the company. By writing that one check, all of a sudden, oh, it's one item on the cap table. It looks like a normal VC-backed company. Oh, I'm not investing $10,000 or $5,000 individually, or $100 individually. But I've not got $1 million check or a $5 million check. Guess what? We now get all the rights that the big boys get. We get anti-dilution, we get preemptive rights, we get information rights, all that good stuff. And the most important thing about an SPV structure is now you've given an incentive to the portal to manage it. So for example, you talk about, and it's very important that the portal must report and provide on. But the portal's not getting paid for ongoing support. The portals and most of the traditional crowdfunding models are saying, I'm taking a 5% or 8% placement fee. I took the money and I ran. I have no incentive or no reason to continue adding value or to help manage this process going forward. So I think the crowdfunding industry as a whole needs to address those issues of A, how do you add value? And it's not just having smart investors at the portal. It's how do you mobilize the crowd? Because the truth be told, crowdfunding done right can actually add more value to a company than even a regular investor base. Right? If you get 5 investors around the table in a venture capital fund, you tell me how they can compete with my 10,000. My 10,000 include the presidents of Fortune 500 companies, chairmen of major banks, incredible entrepreneurs. And if we can bring all these people and their collective wisdom and assistance to bear, then you can do this. So both those issues in terms of how to structure it right and how to add value, I think, are the big elephants in the room that need to be dealt with.
Have you got something to add?
Yeah, no, I concur to all the points you also just made. I think 2 other points that you can look at is first of all, need on the due diligence side. So I think, of course, first of all, on the data that is provided to retail investors, those times the challenge is how do you make that investment decision. So I'm quite a big fan of platforms like AngelList, for example, where there's more of a syndicate structure, where you have a lead investor who kind of really who does all the upfront due diligence and distribute it out to smaller, less sophisticated investors. So and therefore you see like a platform like AngelList is also scaling tremendously quick and very broadly across jurisdictions. So that's one, and I think secondly it was also really not being addressed properly yet. This of course is a byproduct, this kind of these assets that you hold in private companies are of course tremendously illiquid. So how do you deal with secondary trading? There are of course companies like Second Market, there's new boards, you have share proposed in the US who trade these secondary stocks quite well. But a lot of the times these stocks are from ESOPs, so they're coming from the employees who wanna cash in. But I do believe that partly is what you mentioned around cap table, you need to have a clean cap table, you need to be able to take out some early investors. Some investors also with the diversification portfolio needs to be able to sell out. So I think secondary trading platforms or how you address that illiquidity is another key aspect, and it hasn't really been addressed in many local jurisdictions as well. You see quite a bit of volume now in the US, some efforts in Europe, but we would love to see a bit more also in Asia.
When we talk about the regulations, before the Thailand we come up with the regulations and we have two tracks for the investor. We think that it should be flexible enough for the issuer to choose. And if they want that, they would like their backer is a lot of the crowd, they can choose to be the retail investor. But if they did not want to do it, they can select only the accredited investor also.
Thank you. Actually, this crowdfunding has evolved over time, as Jonathan has mentioned, and they evolve into SPVs, where the funds is put in collectively and run by a professional who knows where is the ideal place to put their money. Let me just share with you a little bit. You see, in China during the stock market, in the early part of this year when the stock market is running from 2,000 to 5,000 points, and you get a lot of people come along and say, you know, I can tell you this stock will go up, that stock will go up, and then pull their money, then somebody will go and invest. And this guy become a stock market guru. When the market collapsed from 5,200 points to 3,000 points, all hell broke loose. They couldn't find the person who managed the money. They don't know where the money go to. They don't know which company they actually buy. And how does this happen? This is actually crowdfunding. You know, among a group of friends who get together and say, hey, I think this guy is good. He's a stock guru. We put money in him, and he will get money. And because of no lack of regulation, because of no guidance, these people will run the market. In a bull market, even the fool makes money. So you don't need a champion. Somebody who knows how to buy will make money. It's only in the corrective session that they do not know when to cut. That's why money are lost. So the broad perspective of the regulator is not to protect everybody, but to provide guidance. So that at the end of the day, nobody goes in blindly and then get burned, not even knowing where the money goes to, and eventually this will turn out to be a scam. Right. Before I pose a couple more questions, is there anything maybe the crowd would like to ask some questions? I'd like to open this to, yes?
I'll pose this question to Jonathan. From the way you describe equity crowdfunding, it seems like just starting another fund, which actually a very broad base. There's no totally freedom for you all to invest in any industry or anywhere. It just to me just like a fund basically.
No, it's not. The funds that you want to get into have a minimum investment, typically $1 million, sometimes $5 million. I don't know of any really good funds where you can write a $25,000 or $50,000 check. Doesn't exist. Not in the venture capital world. Okay, you might find some kind of oddball, but the real guys, the big guys, and by the way, you can't get into the big ones, right? If you want to get into Sequoia, I'll take anybody to dinner here who can become a new investor at Sequoia. You got that on record? Because it's not going to happen. Okay, you're not going to get in. They don't need your money. And so today, funds are closed, basically. Either you have a lot of money and you're picking a new manager or a second tier fund or third tier fund, and you've got to really write big checks. Now, number two, a fund is a blind pool, right? You give a venture capitalist the $1 million or $5 million, and they have all the fun, and they decide which investment would be made. You don't get a chance to pick the deal in a fund. So by us, the entry point is $10,000, which again sounds a lot to the man on the street, but it's quite accessible to the mass affluent and the mass wealthy. And number two, you get to pick the deals that you want. You don't like him, fine, you don't do it, you do him, okay, or her. And the bottom line is you get that kind of choice. Also, funds and angel deals have been hyper-local, right? In other words, if you wanted to invest in Silicon Valley, how do you do it? Get on a plane? go hang out at the San Francisco airport and start stopping you, say you have a startup? What do you do? Okay, is someone actually here pitching you to join, WhatsApp or Facebook in the future? And the answer is no. So I think this is what crowdfunding is, which is the ability to make it smaller bite size, discretion, globally accessible deals. But on the other hand, you have to manage it. The problem with a lot of the crowdfunding that I see is that they're throwing away all the best principles, saying it's like a junior IPO. Give the guys some money and watch them run. Okay? I'm sorry, that's not the way the startup companies work. And therefore, the necessity to build structures like SPVs, to do diligence, and to curate this, and not just rely on the infinite wisdom of the crowd, to manage the investment post-deal. Okay, these are essential. I'm sorry, I've got to run, but I'll be joining you later this afternoon again, and I really look forward to spending more time with you.
Thanks. Jonathan has a leave for another meeting. We give him a round of applause. Just to add on to this, actually for crowdfunding, it's project specific. It's not that somebody just raise fund for any investment. The SPV is project specific. So if you put in the SPV 1, you're quite clear that the project is already defined. So it's not for any other investment, it's for that specific investment. Is there any other questions from the floor?
As a potential investor, and given that crowdfunding, I guess, is putting something to work because technology connects investors with investment opportunities, how do I get a full picture of all of the opportunities that are available? So, we've heard from John about his site, but there are numerous other sites available. How does an investor choose? And also, given that some of those opportunities may be on the other side of the world, how does an investor do their due diligence if they can't get on their bike and go down the road and have a look at the opportunity? How does an investor do the due diligence that they'd like to do before they make an investment?
Yeah, Patrick, very good question, obviously. That's notorious hard, or has been very hard, and of course there are now quite a few entrepreneurs trying to solve this. So you see definitely a number of initiatives in that respect. First of all, of course, just on the basics like databases. So how do you get an understanding of what kind of companies are out there and how do you slice and dice it by sector, by funding round, or by geography. So you have entities like Deal.co does it very well, and definitely focus on kind of providing a lot of initial kind of quantitative data around it. Secondly, I think what you do see is that if you're an investor and you want to look at the various kind of crowdfunding platforms, you see now certain aggregators. So it's almost like a price comparison site. So they aggregate and have APIs into various feeds. So there's a company called Deal Index who does it quite well. So that you can really see, okay, I'm this type of investor, I want to invest in this jurisdiction, in this industry, I've got this capital available, and you can kind of scroll down through various platforms. But this is all still in a fairly embryonic state, I would say. No, there are also no shortcuts. I think it takes time to understand the different tools and get familiar with the landscape. And it's also, of course, on the term sheets. If you look at different jurisdictions, different term sheets, you see no standardization these days in that respect. But you need to get familiar with that as well. And there are definitely a number of organizations who provide relevant information online.
I hope that answers your question. Actually, as the technology progresses, you can get more and more information on the portal itself. The authorities will require them to demonstrate their ability, their intention, and who are behind the project specific. So I think these are some very broad guidelines. We can't overprotect everybody, but there is some broad guidelines for Any other question from the crowd?
Hi, I'm Sebastian from Silver Lake, and so far we've been focusing on the investor. So, looking at the subject matter, we have SMEs and startups being served over here, and from my own mindset is that SMEs are not really financially literate, not to mention being ahead of the trend in getting financing. So how do you guys envision equity crowdfunding to serve SMEs?
Well, I think with SMEs, of course, there's a huge opportunity if you look at the liquidity issue that's at play. But it's not so much on the equity side, of course, on the lending side. So, for example, I used to live in London for 11 years, and what we see there, of course, which is, and England in a way, it's quite an advanced state or perspective of all the peer-to-peer lending kind of side, is that you see, of course, a lot of SMEs were basically not served properly by the banks anymore. So we had the RBS, the Lloyds got nationalized due to all the Basel and regulatory frameworks and more compliance costs and whatnot. SMEs were just not commercially viable from a lending perspective. So what the government has done and the FCA, so the Financial Conduct Authority, have done quite creatively and also been enforcing some of these banks is to offload these SME clients, but also some of their loan books to peer-to-peer platforms. And the interesting dynamics around these kind of migrations of loan books is partly that they're of course not financially viable commercial for banks, but what they do is they sometimes need to provide backstop facilities to those peer-to-peer platforms because the way they operate and the much lower cost of underwriting these loans makes it actually quite attractive for the banks again to provide the facility to kickstart the lending engine. So I do believe also if you look at Southeast Asia, there are, and if you look at especially the more emerging markets, 80% of all businesses and all employees are basically working SMEs. If you ask what is the biggest pain point of most SMEs, it is still kind of getting access to financial services. So if you look at it in a broader perspective around kind of financial inclusion, I do believe that everybody in this room, but including the banks, the regulators, the government, have a duty of care or a vested interest to facilitate this type of access of liquidity to SMEs. And therefore, I think that peer-to-peer in that respect is very helpful, and I think also from an educational perspective for SMEs to get access to these platforms is much easier, or will be much more easier than I think that the challenges that SMEs will have to kind of raise funds on the equity side.
In some aspect that as the equity crowdfunding in Thailand is quite new, and the funding portal who came to CSEC, they may come with that, they may be the incubator for the SME, and they're interested to raise funds for them. And when we talk about the SME, we do not mean the very, very small, but the one that they need to have some aspect for the financial statements for their business already.
Let me just take your question a little bit more. It's a personal experience. The SMEs are generally quite well taken care by the banks, financial institutions, and the like. They will only go to crowdfunding for product-specific things. For example, I came across this. Someone came to me and said that he's developed this product which is very useful. It's a medical product which is very useful. It was something to do with monitoring the pulse rate. And you don't have to go to the doctor. There's a mechanics which when you put on, the doctor can monitor in the hospital or in GP clinic or whatever. So he wants to sell, develop and sell this piece of product. So he's already well financed by the banks and all this, but he needed something like $500,000 just to start the production and then to distribute. So what he do, he came to me, he asked if I can do something for him. So one of the best way I can do is probably what we call the interest group crowdfunding. That is, we lift it into the portal, we pass it to the mass, and whoever is interested to contribute towards this, for example, we determine say $100 each for every contributor to it. So for everybody who puts in $100 or more, they get one piece of that data. So that will help them into production. Generally, the SMEs are already well taken care of financial institutions. So the crowdfunding part is very product specific. So just a minute, can we go there? Something to ask? Yes.
Hi, my name is Darren. What
Give the opportunity to the entrepreneur to access to the capital. We think about serve the underserved who cannot raise funds from the IPO, or there are a lot of SME and startups in Thailand. So I think that the SEC see the vital of this thing. So we came up with the regulations. This motivates us to.
So you see a demand in that in Thailand? Because the reason why I asked you was because there's no SEC Singapore here. You know, I asked them why are they not doing it? You know, so because you are here, I asked you why you're doing it.
Actually, we saw the trend in the world trend, and we think that might be important for the SME. So how can we facilitate them and let the regulation on place? And if there is any needs, as a SEC, we can do the best thing that we pave the way for them. And if they are ready to do it, they will come and raise funds from this alternative.
I think one point to make is more of a general point in that respect. I think innovation is not driven by technology, so it's not the technology platforms itself that drive the demand. It's really innovation is driven in the end, especially if you look at fintech and broader sense, by the need. So the consumers or the SMEs, they are desperate, or if you look especially the underbanked, the non-banked, the underserved, they will find ways to get access, to liquidity, or to current accounts and so forth. So there's a tremendous amount of pent-up demand for these services, and therefore platforms will come, and therefore also governments and regulators and banks should all kind of align themselves and work together and really collaborate in building sustainable fintech ecosystems in that respect.
The fintech is also the main thing that drives us also, because we think that if the fintech come and regulator, they do like the ordinary regulator, they cannot match, they cannot facilitate and accommodate the new trend to the world. We did not left behind.
Generally speaking, laws and regulation evolve over time to guide the people, not so much as to regulate, to control, but to guide the people. So you either wait for things to happen so badly, then you start a law, or you do a broad guideline so that everybody can work within a parameter, guided parameter. Shall we have the last question before I would say like to ask a question, we have the last two questions.
I must ask this question because I'm driving crowdfunding in Asia. So I have asked this question last year and also in various other summits. Probably Oscar heard me, Andrew heard me. I am motivated to drive crowdfunding across Asia, and I am going to pose this question to the panelists and also probably Philip yourself. In terms of crowdfunding, or when I say global crowdfunding, I'm really referring to what could be possible when we talk about cross-border crowdfunding. John mentioned earlier. He mentioned about, it is really borderless, as in, the investors are not limited to where they want to put the money. But when it comes to regulations, there are all the considerations. So, I like to leave it here for the three panelists to answer, and probably Philip to add.
Should we start? Oh, two. Okay.
I will start first. In Thailand, if we ask about the cross-border, in our regulation, the fundraiser need to be the Thai company. So at the beginning, we think that we should allow the local company do it first, but we did not limit it to only the local company. If we saw the opportunities and if the market is developed and the demand is coming, for the investor, as John said, that we did not have any limitation for the investor.
Well, a couple of points. I think again, another point of the innovation is partly collaboration, as you just mentioned. I think, and we see also, of course, now some initiatives also of regulators kind of working together and comparing and contrasting kind of what is working well, what's not. So I think lessons learned is very important. Looking at use cases in perhaps more advanced kind of crowdfunding or crowd lending, crowd equity funding kind of solutions is very beneficial. Obviously, on one hand, certain ecosystems or financial centers are to a certain extent all competing with each other. But on the other hand, you need to provide a level playing field. So, for example, what you see in Europe now very well is you have European passports. So you get a license for a peer-to-peer lender, so you can really scale much quicker in various jurisdictions. So I think it's, again, it's around collaboration and peer-to-peer, for example, has been also around for much longer. So if you look at, for example, Zopa, which is one of the biggest ones in the UK, it's been around since 2005. So I had my first 20 loans that I provided on Zopa kind of for 8 years now or so. And so there's definitely a lot of data points and there's quite a bit of history that we can all learn and lean on to push these agendas forward.
Actually, this thing about cross-border crowdfunding basically is an internet-based fundraising platform. So whether you're in Singapore, you're in US, you're in any other country, I believe it's a borderless instrument for everybody to use. Except perhaps in the area of regulation, if you were to contribute money, let's say, to another country and something happened to you, the Singapore government could not do anything because that's not based in Singapore. But if you were to put your money into a country that's regulated, of course there's some recourse in the country of origin. The law then will be a guideline for you. Pose a final question to our panel. Crowdfunding is here to stay, that's for sure. It's an extension of helping your family, your country, and it used to be passed around by word of mouth. And I'm very sure crowdfunding is here to supplement the banking system, the financial institutions and the like. Is there anything you want to advise the man in the street how to get rich? I'm not saying getting rich overnight, but you invest in Alibaba, you invest in eBay, probably you have some equity today, you will reap some handsome return. But what if they still disallow equity crowdfunding? So there's something that we look at it in the future. But let's hear from our panelists. How do they? Is there any good advice for you for the man in the street?
Well, I'm not a fan, of course, of the quick rich schemes myself. I think in life you can't make too many shortcuts. But on the other hand, I think it's for for the man in the street, I think it's getting onto a learning curve. You know, I think obviously currently if you look at the capital markets at large, you know, some of the returns are pretty tough these days. I think some kind of small asset allocation towards kind of private investments might make sense. No, probably not from an IRR perspective as such, but probably if you can, get some affinity with that company, if you can get some kind of relationship with the founder, I think it can be a very rewarding journey, perhaps not from a monetary perspective, but more from a learning perspective. So I think that might be a good starting point for the man on the street.
As a regulator, we have some concern about the man in the street because we think that equity crowdfunding is invest in the startup company. So our duty is that how to educate them to know what is the risk involved. So we don't want them to over expect that they can get rich quick. So it's our tough duties to educate them.
Sure.
I believe that crowdfunding is another form of disintermediation, and it should offer the competitive for both sides. I mean, it should be cheaper for project owner, but at the same time should give a better return for the investors or the funders. So I believe in the future, and then as mentioned, I think it's also principle of Bank 3.0, that it's not something you go anymore, but something you do, and then it's in crowdfunding.
Thank you very much. But I'd like to add something for this. You see, as a man in the street put some small money, which may mean a lot, because if I only have $10,000, I put $10,000, that's 100% my asset. That's it. If it's gone, it's gone. So going forward, some of the things that the investor, the man in the street can do is they must be willing also to stretch out the hand. That is, for example, they're willing to sign an acknowledgement that I'm putting my money in non-liability, non-recourse investment. I think this will help the regulator a lot, because the regulator also wants to make sure that you know what you are doing. And if you think you want to be protected, you still want a return, you still want a warranty, 10 doubles and 5 doubles kind of thing, I think that is a little difficult. All investment involve some level of risk. If you can take the risk, you should plunge in. But if you need that money for your baby powder, please don't do it. Because the men in the street will always come back crying because they lost the money. It's not whether it's big money or small money, but it is really money. And when money you need, it is absolutely necessary for you to take care of it. And with this, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.